Hi and welcome to this video for installing the VMX onto EVE-NG. Now, following on from the last video where the SRX took an extremely long time to load, I've resolved that particular issue. I've gone back to using VMware rather than VirtualBox for this particular session, and I've also increased the power of my server, and now the images are booting in around about 5 minutes time, which is what we would expect. So let's get cracking with this. So as we can see, we're in the folder that we was in yesterday, or well, it was yesterday for me, it was probably 5 minutes ago for yourself, that we downloaded from Juniper, and then we've extracted the VMX image from the zipped bundle. So I'm going to go into VMX and VMX again, and I'm going to go into, I believe it's images. Okay, now as we can see, we have a lot of images here, a lot of files. We only need 3 of these for the control plane and 1 of them for the forwarding plane. So what we're going to do, this one here, which is the JNCIS 17 R1 13 qemu2, that's the first one that we're going to actually do. What we're going to do, well, what I'm going to do, because I'm going to also use this file later for GNS3, is I'm going to make a copy of it and then rename that particular copy. So this will just take a moment. Fantastic. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy it. Sorry, I'm going to rename it virtuoa.qemu2 because this is our A folder. So let's go to rename, and it's VIRT. Okay, so we have the first one named Virtuoa, or VIRTIOA, and we're going to name the second one B and the third one C. Okay, so what we need now is the VMX HDD image, so we just need to find that here, and it's right next to what I was doing. So I'm going to make a copy of that, and we're going to rename this copied file. If you're only going to be using one virtualization platform, then of course there's no need for you to do copies. You still need to rename them, but you don't need to make copies of them. Okay, VIRTIOB. Fantastic. And the last one we want to do is the Meta USB re-image. So let's have a little look at that. That's the service, Meta USB S-Re1. It's this one, Meta. No, metadata. Is it metadata? Yes, it's metadata -USB re. So it's that one. I'm going to make a copy of that and paste that there, and I'm going to now rename the copy. So virtioc.qcal. So just make sure I spelled it correctly. So virtioc. Okay, fantastic. Alright, so what we're going to do, we're going to create our folders now. So this is our control plane. So it's not the forwarding plane we're dealing with, it's the control plane now. So I'm going to copy in the make directory, opt, unetlab, addons, qemu, the control plane, and obviously the version number domestic. So I've already SSH'd in and paste that in. Brilliant. Okay, and let's move that down and bring up our FileZilla, and let's get into the correct folder on the EVENG itself. So it's opt, and it's unetlab, it's addons, it's qemu, and as we can see we have the control plane now. It's appeared here. Oops, double click on that and it's empty. So let's refresh this. Okay, so we have, just wait for it to come up here, 2 seconds. Okay, so we have all 3 files here, so I'm just going to select all 3 of them and I'm going to drag them across, and we're going to upload them into the VCP folder. Won't take long, a few moments. The files are not super big. Brilliant. Okay, now let's create our forwarding plane now, the folder for that. So I'm going to go back into my SSH client and paste that in to make the virtual forwarding plane. Brilliant. And if I go up 1 level, refresh this, and there's my virtual forwarding plane. Excellent stuff, excellent. So now we need to find the correct image, which is, well, this one, the VFPC image file. So we're going to rename that virtual A. Actually, let me delete the A, B and C. It seems as they will get in the way here. Okay, fantastic. Let's make a copy of this. And then we'll rename that copy. All right. Just waiting for that to delete. It shouldn't take long. One thing I forgot to mention is all the images need to have the qemu2 extension on the end. So I left the virtual B and C as .image, so I've just renamed them .qemu2. Okay, so let's go back into the forwarding plane now, and let me just move that down. Yep, so I've got my image for the VFP. So I'm going to refresh, and there we go. I'm going to drag this across and upload it. So we've got the control plane already up and running in here. Now we're just waiting for the forwarding plane to get on. As soon as that's done, we're going to do the fixed file permissions, and then we're going to have a look and see whether or not they have been successfully seen on EVENG, and if we can run them. This will just take a few moments. Like I said, there's a couple of caveats to the VMX image and the QFX image for that matter, where they have to be connected in a certain way once they're up and running. Okay, we'll go through that in a moment. And let's pop that fixed file permissions in. Fantastic. Okay, so I've got my EVENG up and running, or my PNet. Let's go to add an object, node, and see if the control planes are forwarding planes. Sometimes you have to close the lab and go back into it again. Let's do that. Alright, let's open my lab that I'm dealing with. And let's see if the images are now here. So let's have a look at the nodes. Ah, there we go. We now have the control plane and the forwarding plane for the VMX. Okay, so what's it got? So it's set to 4 CPUs, 4 gigs of memory, and 2 Ethernet adapters. That is for the control plane, which is absolutely fine. The control plane only needs 2 adapters, one for its management and one for its internal link with the forwarding engine. So let's bring out the forwarding engine now. Now this uses the same, strangely. This is using 4 gigs and 3 CPUs. Now you can drop these down to like 1.5, 2 gigs each quite easily. They don't need to be this high. It's just some of the settings that EVE-NG puts in automatically, but you don't need to stick with them. I mean, if I remember rightly, I believe I've got some documentation here actually for that. I think the VCP, the control plane, can run on 2 gigs, I believe, and 1 CPU, and the forwarding plane, I believe, can run on, it needs the 4 gigs and the 3 CPUs. But you know, I'm not going to change it now since it's already here. So let's connect them up. So what you need to do, you need to connect them to the second interface, which is the internal interface, or EM1. So if you've ever done the JNCIA or the JNCIS, you would have learned that the control plane and the forwarding plane in real equipment is separated with, internally, and there's a link between them. Juniper has decided to do the same thing with these images. So your control plane and your forwarding plane are separate, and they do have a dedicated link. You always just need to remember to link them to EM1 or the internal link. So if you're using GNS3, you'll need to do the same thing. You'll also need to rename the interfaces as well. GNS3 unfortunately has a very bad habit of not naming interfaces correctly. Okay, so we got them on. Let's start them up and let's see what happens with that. Just wait for that to go green, and hopefully that one to go green at the bottom. There we go. And let's get the terminals up for both of them. And there we go. Alright, sometimes this happens. It will boot up, it will connect. It just takes a little while. Yeah, sometimes the internal HTML client doesn't always connect, but it will connect soon enough. Alright, so I'm just going to wait for these to boot, and I'll be back to you in a moment. Okay, so it's taken about 10 minutes to boot up the control plane. The forwarding plane booted up within about 5 minutes. So as we can see here, the login for the forwarding plane is Windrunner Linux. Now this, you don't do anything on the forwarding plane. This is what you connect your interfaces to. Regarding the control plane is what you actually use to manage the device. So we can close that. So with the control plane, the only thing you connect to the control plane is the forwarding plane on the internal link, or EM1. And if you're going to use management, so you want to connect it to a switch, or want to connect it to your cloud or anything like that, then you can use the EM0 or FPX0 interface on the control plane. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn these the right way up, because this is how they should actually be. Well, for me anyway, I prefer to have what I'm going to be configuring on the top. So all your connections, so if I wanted to connect my SRX for argument's sake, I would connect it Giga Ethernet 000 from the VSRX to Giga Ethernet 000 on the forwarding plane. Okay. Okay, so let's have a look at the control plane and see what we can find. So let's log in with root. As you can see, it's put us straight into the shell. Now you're going to see this on every control plane. It doesn't matter which version you're using. It automatically tries to do an auto image upgrade via DHCP, and you will have this particular error or message all the time until you get rid of it. So let's go to CLI to get into operator mode, and let's go to configure, and we're going to just type in delete chassis auto upgrade, and then we're going to set the root authentication so we can actually save this configuration. So set system root authentication plain text password, and put a password in, and commit and quit, or just commit actually. Okay, so that commit's complete. Now this will actually now stop the auto upgrade from happening, and let's do a run show interface terse and see if the interfaces are here yet. And yes, they are. We have our GE000 all the way up to our 009. Okay, let's exit out of that, and let's do show chassis FPC. Okay, so we can see that the FPC is online, as we can see there. Let's show the PIC status, and the PIC status is online, and it's telling us it's virtual. So there you go. That's how you set up the VMX on EVE-NG or unetlab, and it works a treat. So in the next video, what we're going to do the switch, the QFX. It is a data center switch, but you know, you could do normal switching on it if you didn't want to use the VSRX. It works the same way as the VMX, so it has two separate nodes for it. However, there is an issue with the interfaces. You have to delete a ton of interfaces, but we'll get to that in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.